Okay, let's see if I can get the button right. It is Friday. I'm ready for the weekend. Oh boy. Okay, so what am I doing here? Yeah, something about a field. Oh, I don't know how I do this to myself. I am not trying, I promise. It is not intentional. Like, I just want to do some work, get work done, actually accomplish something. I don't mind learning in the process, but I do not choose to walk through these minefields. So this was purely by chance. And yeah, so I did learn something, but this was an interesting journey. And apparently, other people, this wasn't necessarily obvious either. So I'm not necessarily alone. So it started with a very simple request. I just want one new field added to a Business Central Web API. Just one, right? So the request is that the customer wants to essentially extract all their item information to some other system. And as part of that, they need to know the quantity available, is what you might call it, or another word that is, in this case, is shown in Business Central is quantity on hand. And so, hey, can you add the quantity on hand value, that field value, to the Business Central Web API for items, right? And so this data is available, as we looked, from the items table. Simple, right? Like, okay, no big deal. Should be straightforward. But having been down this road before, I never, ever, ever promise that I can add even just one field to anything, to a table, to a page, to an API, because I've learned my lesson. This is not my first rodeo. I've said, sure, how hard can that be? Whammo. It's like some bizarre field that has some weird quirk that, like, even if you try to add it, nothing shows up. You got to do something else, and it's coming from somewhere else. So there's all these it's like, come on. So now, even if it's just one field, I say, I don't know. I need to look to see if there are any complications. Maybe it's easy, maybe it's not. And I'd like to be able to say yes. I'd like to be able to say this is going to take X hours, but I've learned the hard way. I just can't do it. Like, I just don't know if I'm walking into a minefield. So with that, let's talk about this and let me show you the journey that I went through. So here we have Business Central. This happens to be my Docker container, so but vanilla. So I'm going to go into the items, and on the items, let's look at the Athens mobile pedestal, and you will notice that quantity on purchase order 20, sales order 0, and job order. Actually, where is it? I thought it was here. See, now I'm already confused. So let me back out. I thought there was there it is. It's right in front of me. Sorry. Quantity on hand 5. Okay. So just let's skip past the definition of quantity on hand. Okay. Let's just pretend that's a non-issue, because I know what you're saying right now. But Steve, I know. Let's just pretend that quantity on hand, we know exactly what that is, and it is exactly what we want. Great. Quantity on hand, right? Okay, so how do we get that out of BC? Well, if we go to like the item list, we have quantity on hand. But how do we extract that? The customer had apparently looked at the OData pages, and I guess it wasn't there. And so I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to deal with this, I'd rather go with the Business Central API. So how do I get that on the page? Well, I can just kind of tell by now that this is a quantity amount. And if I click on here, I see that it jumps to an item. It's like a list of transactions. I'm assuming this is like a ledger. And so I know, let me drill into it this way. I think it gives a different view. If I click on quantity on hand here, I explicitly see that these are item ledger entries. So I've now drilled from quantity 5 down into this pile of data. And it's like, okay, I know what that means. I know that this is a flow field. It's a calculated field. It is not a persistent, static, typical database field. Fine, not a problem. We're totally cool so far. So now, if I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, well, what is that field name? And, if we go to personalize, does it show up? So I'm going to go to Page Inspector, and I see quantity on hand. Well, I type hand. I don't know if you can see it over there, but here, let me just resize. There is nothing to show in this view. Well, that's weird. Let me type quantity. Well, there are quantities there, but none of them is quantity on hand. Now, at this point, I was a little puzzled because I think this is the first time I've encountered this. And so I didn't think of alternate ways of trying to find this field. It didn't dawn on me at the time. I now know to use a slightly different approach, but at the time I was like, that's weird. There is no quantity on hand field in the table. So what is going on? So I clicked on View Table and I jumped over to this view. And this is the item table, right? This is the raw table. I'm looking at the data. Well, if I scroll over here somewhere, I should see, where is it? Where is it? Well, somewhere here, there is a quantity on hand, like I promise you. And so there we go. Quantity on hand, right there. So wait a minute. I go to Page Inspector, there is no quantity hand. I look at the table, there is a quantity on hand. So I'm like, okay, what is going on here? So, being the good developer that I am, I went into VS Code and I said, well, I'm clever. I know how to figure this out, right? I'm going to pull up the actual item AL code, or the AL code for the item table. So here we have table 27, item. As far as I know, I'm looking at the source code here. Field 1, number. Field 2, code, description. Okay. So I search for hand. Is handled. That's not quite what I'm looking for. So let's type on hand. No results. None. Wait a minute. How can I be looking at the table in Business Central and see a quantity on hand field with a value? It's clearly there. But when I'm looking at the source code for this table, there is no quantity on hand field. And it's spelled out quantity on hand. Quantity space on nothing. So I thought, okay, what's going on? Is this some weird procedure or function or code unit or event? I don't know what you call it. And so I start scrolling down this thing. Well, if you've ever looked at the item table code, let's just jump to the bottom. It's 3,800 lines long. And while that is not an epic novel, it's kind of long. So I went through this a couple times and I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling and I'm like, okay, what is going on here? I don't see quantity on hand. And I'm getting down to these fields, 99 million. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this field was not added lately, right? And I'm getting into then keys and triggers and procedures. And I'm like, I'm not seeing it. So I had to start over from the beginning. And I'm scrolling through and I'm like, okay, what is going on? Now, if I would have been smart, I know you're yelling at me. Steve, it told you back in Page Inspector where to look. I didn't dawn on me, right? I'm new to this. I'm clueless. And so I'm going through and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. These look like flow fields. So on my third pass through this 3,800 line file, I found it. Do you see it? It's right there, right in front of you, staring at you. Field 68, inventory, decimal, calc formula. How I would have known to look for that, not sure. In retrospect, I know, I would have gone here, would have gone to my item card. I would not have found hand. So I'm not quite sure how I would have known to look for this, but now that I know it's called inventory, I can type inventory. And if I search, there it is. Inventory field number 68, decimal. Now, I would have never known to search for the word inventory when right here and on every page I've looked, it's called quantity on hand. But now that I know, I could potentially search for the value 5. So yeah, I'm going to get some wacky stuff, but eventually I'm going to scroll through here and say, it's not net invoice quantity. Maybe it's inventory. So that's an alternate way to try to figure out where this thing is coming from. So, yep, I've searched for the quantity of 5. Nothing else seems applicable. And so now I kind of know, well, it's probably inventory. I'm not 100% sure, but inventory 68 decimal base application, that's kind of looking like a good candidate. Okay, so now I apparently am not the only one who knew this, or it would have been obvious to find this. So, how do I switch over here? So, now I'll show you my Twitter timeline is a bit of a mess. It's kind of crazy, but the first one that I saw scrolling through at 6:30 this morning was Daniel's reply. It's the U.S. localizations caption translation of the base application. And I read this and I thought, okay, 1, like 6:30 brain, what does this mean? 2, the light bulb went off. 3, you have got to be kidding me. Like, what? So I got it. BC is taking the word inventory. That's not good enough. Apparently in the US, we don't know what that word means. It's not English enough for us. So it had to be translated to quantity on hand for us folk in the US. Now, it may be translated that way in other countries. I don't know. I haven't really dug into it yet. But in the US localization and perhaps others, inventory is translated to quantity on hand. So Daniel helpfully dug this out. He figured out where it was coming from. He understood like what was going on, or he'd seen this fun issue before. He dug this out, and let me see if I can move this. Oops. What did I do? Okay. And he found source inventory translates to quantity on hand. I would have never thought to check the translation files or think that translation was the cause of this weird behavior. Like it didn't even occur to me that there would be a different caption for a field in a table. Like I'm looking at the table. I'm not even seeing the field name. I'm seeing a translated caption value or field name value, whatever you're going to call this. Whoa, crazy. Now, yes, if you've been around in the nav world for many years or you've really dug into BC, like you may say, yep, makes total sense. Coming from a different universe, this is like, whoa, this is pretty crazy. Would have never occurred to me. I've never dug, like I'm familiar with translations and XLIF files and the concept. I had no idea it went down to the table, field, name, or caption level. So this is eye-opening for me. So with that said, okay, we have just learned something. We now know, okay, this is called inventory. And knowing is half the battle. Now that we know this, and I happen to coincidentally find this, I just didn't know what was going on. Like this looked like the field I wanted. Daniel was the one who found and explained first in my disastrous Twitter timeline that this is what's going on. So I thought, okay, this is probably what's going on. And so I gave this a try. I created a custom API page, basically pasted in the default one, called it custom API items. And then I went down here somewhere and I thought I did. Did I not? What? Items, right? Oh, okay. There it is. Again, hard to find this stuff. So I was going in here. Let me just reproduce this because it's not that hard. I would have thought field quantity on hand and rec dot nothing, right? So quantity, no quantity on hand, right? This is another thing that I was trying to do, use IntelliSense to find what I was doing. Once I figured out it's called inventory, well, you just say dot inventory. Voila, like you're done. And so I added all of this effort just to add 4 lines to an API page. Now, just for good measure, I added quantity on purchase order, quantity on sales order, and it turns out the customer's going to need these anyway, probably. So there we go. Caption quantity on hand. I chose to call it quantity on hand, right? And it turns out that it looks like this field name is what shows up in the API. I'm still learning these details. So now that we've added this one field, after all of that craziness, one field, I publish this, go over to Postman, and I then send this request. And what do we have? Let's see, can I make this bigger? Not easily. So I don't know if you can see that, but down here, I see quantity on hand. Let me try Control Plus. There we go. Oh, it kind of makes things crazy. How do I hide this? F11? Nope. Anyway, you can see down here in this little postage stamp window, quantity on hand for quantity on purchase order 7, quantity on sales order 0. So numbers are coming through and I verify they match for the particular item. Well, what did I realize then after looking at this 3 times? Guess what? It's already there. Inventory is already in the standard BC API, web API for items. One, it didn't occur to me to look in the first place, so new lesson learned. Check your API before you try to add custom fields to it. 2, I wouldn't have even thought to look for the word inventory again because I would have been looking for quantity on hand. So it's already there. So like lots of face palms going on here. And so I don't need this custom quantity on hand unless they want to call it something different, in which case I can just modify the field name. They will want quantity on purchase order, quantity on sales order, and those don't appear to be here. You may be able to extend this for somehow to, those may exist somehow, but I think I'll need to add these. So that was a crazy and wacky journey over the last 12 hours for me, 12 plus hours. So, and someone asked me, what does my Twitter timeline look like? So, you could just see where the scroll bar is right there. That's how much I had to scroll through this morning. So Kristen, 20 hours ago, asked this question and said, does it exist in the table? Is it a new field? Like what's the context? And David said, well, check the caption. First thing I checked, right? And I can't find it in the table. This went on, this went on, this went on. There are a few other tweets that I had. And I'm scrolling through this and, oh, looks like Christian had found it. Sorry, I didn't even see it. So he had found it in the base application ENUS XLF. So again, wouldn't even occur to me to have this file, and I need to see where it is. So he has the BC code history repository, which you'll see up above, which is Stefan Moron's repository where he's maintaining all this. So I could have, now I know I need to clone that. So it looks like Christian might have popped in first. Let's see. Then I asked about this weird table 9599. And so I'm scrolling through this, try to figure out what's going on, and asking other questions. And there's Daniel's 13 hours ago. And yeah, so thank you, Christian, for finding that. I didn't see it in this pile of stuff this morning. And then Daniel found it as well. And yep. So it goes on and on. I'm still scrolling here. And Waldo says, here's where you go and get that code. Make sure to clone that repository. But it's a pretty massive repository. And then you need to learn how to search that repository. And text search for GitHub reaches its limits on large translation files. So it doesn't work so well in the browser. So you need to have a local. And so local VS Code does the trick. And then it goes on. It goes on. And AJ pops in. And then Waldo pops in. And yep. And Jeremy anticipated my morning. And it turns out that when I get more than 20 notifications in Twitter, it just shows 20 and a plus sign, 20 plus. So I have no idea how many notifications there were, but yep, it goes on and on. So there you go. So that was the journey of finding just one field. Turns out it was already there. Who would have known? So coincidentally, Amel, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Amel, he happened to also, just totally unrelated, post to Twitter, hey, you looking for an answer for your BC question? Join the Discord channel. And I was like, duh. I mean, my default is to post on Twitter and then I'll maybe email someone. But excellent reminder. Jeremy Visca set up a Discord server, and I don't know if there are multiple invite links, but that is one invite link that Emil posted in his tweet. So you can go over there. You can request access or membership or joining or whatever it's called. You can join the Discord channel. There are several hundred people on there, over 300 it looks like right now. So that's another resource for asking these types of questions. So with that, just one field, the sequel. I learned a lot, interesting journey, many things I need to remember to do now when searching for just one field. I need to look at the field values when searching in Page Inspector to check for an alternate name. I need to get the field number so that I can find it more easily in the code, whether that's table code, page code, whatever. I need to clone Stefan's GitHub repository with the BC code history. I need to learn how to search through the XLF files to look for translations. And there's probably something else that I've forgotten. I need to check APIs to see whether the field already exists before trying to just add it again. So many, many lessons learned. And so it all started from a customer wanting to add just one field to a Business Central API. So with that, yeah, have a good Friday. Enjoy your weekend. And yeah, have a good one. Okay, talk to you later.
Good morning, son. How are you? Skies above. Jeeps